Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the webinar of Adam Markel. We will start in a couple of minutes. Hi, Adam.
Hello, Ellen. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Yes. Good
Thank
day.
you. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, I love ASW. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Wonderful.
Nice. So I will give you now the stage. Thank you, Adam.
Oh, thank you for that. Fantastic. So I am Adam Markel. I'm a resilience guy. In fact, I've spent the last 12 years of my life really working on how it is that we succeed even in the midst of great uncertainty and great adversity. And I wrote a book about that topic on resilience called Pivot. But here's how the story began. 3 whistles rang out, and I knew what that meant. 3 whistles on the beach meant someone was missing. I was 19 years old and I was a lifeguard. I ran down to the main stand and the captain shouted the order. They lost someone at field 3. It's a search and rescue. Go. 10 of us ran down the beach to join the search team. There was already a crowd. People were pointing to where they last saw the missing swimmer. We dove into the ocean and we swam out past the breaker and we formed a straight line perpendicular to the shore and started our search pattern. We dove down about 10 feet into the cold, dark Atlantic, and we swam into the current and came straight up for air. And when everyone's head popped up, we repeated that process again and again and again. We were exhausted, but we didn't come in. After more than an hour, I heard that whistle again. It was a terrible feeling. We weren't done. We hadn't found him. We got out of the water and our captain led us in a moment of silence. And when we opened our eyes, he looked at each of us and he said, "No one goes down in our water. No one goes down on our watch." And then he said something to me that I will never, ever forget. You either make the save or you die trying. Just a little intense, huh? But we had to get back up in the lifeguard stand and do our job, continue to do our job that day. We had to learn something from that experience. We had to come together as a lifeguard crew. We had to do better. That's what resilience looked like on the beach. What does resilience look like to you in this moment? In the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of the kind of disruption that we've all faced, the massive uncertainty that's been a part of all of our lives for so long now, for more than a year. What does resilience look like to you? I want you to go ahead right now and start to use the chat, because today we're going to dive into that topic. Just like I got to dive into that long ago when I was a lifeguard at Jones Beach. We're going to talk about resilience. I'm going to start with a definition. Now, all of us have experienced so much adversity in the past year. How do you define resilience for yourself right now? Go ahead and start using the chat, and I'm going to start to read those answers. We all know that it's been different for all of us. And in fact, when it comes to resilience, there's as many definitions for that word resilience as there are people to define it. So go right ahead now and type into the chat how you define resilience. What has it been like for you over the last 12 months or so? dealing with the pandemic, dealing with the disruption, dealing with the threat physically, financially, and in so many, emotionally, mentally, in so many other ways. How have you dealt with that at this point? Now, I'm not able to see those answers at the moment for some reason in the chat. I'm not sure if they're in there. Perhaps, Deanna, you see them. I'm not sure if you do or not, but I'm going to just invite you to not only use the chat, but also to use the Q&A as well. So you can also put questions that come in. I see there Valerie wrote, being optimistic while having to adapt and change in the face of many unknowns. Yes, being optimistic while having to adapt. Resilience equals the ability to recover. Mary, thank you. It has been an emotional whirlwind, yes, but meditation has helped. Thank you, Mary. Beautiful. Yes. Resilience in many ways is something different for all of us. And we have been researching it. As I said, I've been involved in looking at how it is that we show up as our best, even in the midst of adversity. And I've been studying that for more than 12 years now. I love that. Elena, not to be influenced by a negative energy of others. Yes, exactly. The definition that we've come to settle upon is this one in front of you right now, that resilience is the ability to actually utilize, and leverage uncertainty as a catalyst for long-term growth, meaning that we use the uncertainty and the adversity for our growth to create new results in our lives. The studies are clear, even coming out of the last great recession, which was a massive disruption to the world. And even then, looking at the companies, the organizations that came out of that recession, the ones that were the most resilient were the ones that not only recovered the fastest, but the ones that were able to actually accelerate afterwards. The pandemic has changed so many things for so many people, entrepreneurs, business owners, companies, organizations everywhere. One thing that we have found is that the organizations that are able to develop their resilience are more productive. And the ones that are not, the ones that don't collaborate well, the ones that don't manage their time and their talent well, they're barely surviving. But the ones that have been resilient, have developed that resilience, have developed that way of bringing people together to discuss and to work on the things that we're going to talk about today, those organizations are thriving. They're thriving even in the midst of unprecedented uncertainty and disruption. Resilient organizations have better health. Their employees are more engaged. They have a better quality of life. They have more energy. They have less incidents of burnout and health issues, all because of this one concept that for so long people have thought was a soft skill. And it's actually probably the most important skill, hard skill, that any of us can be learning right now. And it's the time to learn it now, because we will surely need, as I know my own name is Adam, I know that we will be called upon to be resilient again in the future. Isn't that true? I see folks are putting their answers in the chat right now. So that's fantastic. Yes, put in the chat right now if you believe that this is not the last disruption or the last time that we're going to be tested to a great degree in our lives with things that are uncertain, things that are challenging, things that are even threatening, because we know that is what is natural. Change is the way of the universe. It's the one great constant. It's kind of a paradox if you think about it, that change is a constant in the universe. All things must change. But when it comes to resilience, when it comes to that topic, that word, I think a lot of people think and define it as the ability to bounce back from setbacks. It's sort of the Rocky model. If you remember this movie, Rocky, the original Rocky, anybody remember the year? Go ahead and put in the chat if you remember the year that the very first Rocky came out. Sylvester Stallone has made, get this, eight Rocky movies. Amazing. When was the first one? If you know the date of that, go ahead and put it in the chat. But here's the thing about Rocky. You know, he's the model of that ability to get back up, to take the punch and still get back up. In fact, he gets knocked down over and over and over again in that movie. And everything I see, Andy wrote 1979, almost very close. Rocky just keeps taking the punches and getting back up, you know? And every time he gets back up, he goes, you know, that's all you got. He wins our hearts for sure. He wins our hearts in that movie, but he also loses the fight. And he don't look too good in the end either. He's all banged up. The resilience is not just about how it is that we get back from setback. How do we get back up? It's really not about how we endure. It's not about how we win the Night Owl Award, in other words. It's about how we recover. And this is the one thing that I want you to take away from our time together today that's so profound. It is not about endurance. It is about recovery. And we've got to develop our recovery before we need it. Blair Braverman is an Alaskan sled dog musher. I know it's a lot to say. An amazing woman. She races in the Iditarod, that 100-mile race in the middle of the frozen tundra of Alaska. And with her dogs, the dogs that are working so hard for her, she's learned that it is far easier to prevent the fatigue of her dogs in the first place than to recover from it later, for them to recover from it. So she feeds them before they know they're hungry. She gives them water before they know they're thirsty, and she rests them before they know they're in need of rest, because they'll just keep going and keep going until they've got nothing left, which means in the end, they don't win the race. And I think that's true for so many of us, that we think that we've got to just keep going and going and going, especially in times when we feel threatened, in times of great peril. The pandemic has made uncertainty a natural state of being for so many of us each and every day. We don't know what's going to happen next, what's going to be the next normal or the new normal, because it's constantly changing. And so we think it's like running a marathon that has no end. But we've got to do what Blair Braverman does with her dogs. We've got to make sure that we recover and create our recovery plan before we are actually exhausted. There's a cost to our exhaustion. There's a cost to the lack of recovery. And that cost is our ability to think clearly, our ability to think big. Our world is in a state of constant change. I could say that the world is crazier or more challenging than it's ever been, but that would be untrue. All throughout my life, there have been great challenges that our world has faced. Challenges that we will face in the future, no doubt as well. This is very much like those times. Maybe it's a bit more extreme, or it feels that way, but we've got to be able to think beyond these things. We've got to be able to think big. And when we're too tired, when we're too busy, when we're too overwhelmed, it's impossible to think big. Resilience is really holistic. It's not just mental. It's not the Rocky model. It's not just physical. It's all of them. It's mental, it's emotional, it's physical, of course, and it's spiritual as well. Now, I know a lot of you have already gone ahead and taken the resilience assessment tool that we shared with many of you that registered have already taken it. I want to just quickly share a little bit of the results. So overall, for everybody that was part of this webinar from ASW that took this resilience assessment, and by the way, it takes 3 minutes. If you've not yet taken the assessment, it's very simple. Just go to asw.resiliencerank.com. and it will give you a resilience score for yourself. It's very, very important that we know where we begin this discussion, meaning where is it that you are lacking in some mental resilience, some emotional resilience, some physical resilience, and even some spiritual resilience. And I mean by that there's a place where you're feeling out of alignment. Where is that? Where does that show up? Well, it shows up in answering these 16 questions that takes about 3 minutes. And ultimately, it will produce a score for you and a series of responses that help us to understand where you're coming from at the moment. So overall, for this organization, this data set, which was 86 people, 3% of those that took the assessment were in the green area, 48% were in the red area, and 49%, almost an equal amount, were in this yellow area. So what are we talking about here? Let me just sort of dive in and show you how this broke down. The red areas are the areas of greatest concern. And right now in the mental quadrant, many of you are working on little sleep, or working in a space where work is constantly present in your life. It's constantly present with you, morning, noon, and night. Many of you are working on weekends. A weekend is something that's not even a weekend anymore. There's no such thing. When we talk about the physical quadrant, it seems that many of you are not taking that time to eat something that's been prepared or is healthy, but instead you're settling for convenience. Many of you are on your phone almost all day long, constantly checking the phone for messages, for emails, for things on social media. It's something that we have come to know is called constant cognitive arousal. It's a fancy term. It just means that we're constantly on the phone. And what that does when we're constantly on the phone is that we're constantly feeling this low-level anxiety, this sense that we're supposed to be doing something, that there's things that are left undone, there's things that we must attend to in order to be safe, to have ourselves be safe. In fact, you know, I told that story about being a lifeguard. We're all lifeguards in so many ways. We're kin in that respect because we're guarding so many things. We're guarding our families, we're guarding our customers, our businesses. We're constantly in this state of being on guard. And that low level of anxiety produces cortisol in our body. It's sort of the chemical equivalent of the fight or flight reaction. And we're constantly in that state. And what that does is it actually depletes us. It exhausts us. And so when looking at these results, there's no question that in all the quadrants, the one that you are all the strongest in is the emotional area. So clearly what it's telling us is that you are able to trust yourself to find solutions, that you go inward, that you look for answers inside. And that is a very, very strong sign. On the spiritual side, if you take a look at question 14, it says that there are significant gaps between what I say is most important in my life and how I actually allocate my time. And that's something that we have to pay attention to, because that's a vital disconnect to be aware of. I wake up in the morning excited for the day with a sense of purpose. It's not more alarming, frankly, than we see in a lot of organizations, but it's something that we must pay attention to. That early morning feeling, that waking feeling is so important. Now, where do we go with this? So let's say your score is a score that gives you room for improvement, that there's areas to identify that you could make improvements. What do you do with that? We know that all improvement, every area of our lives that we want to make better, starts with change. And we also know that so many of us fear change, that change is something that actually is threatening to us. So what do we do about it? Well, for one thing, I want to share the story of someone else and what they did when it came to big change. So if you know who this is, I want you to go ahead and type in the chat if you recognize this gentleman. Obviously, he's carrying, holding up the British flag behind him, and there are cyclists below. So I want to take you back to 1998, where this gentleman took over as the performance director for the British cycling team. As soon as you get his name, go ahead and type it in the chat. And if you don't, I'll tell you who it is. But in 1998, the British cycling team had not won a gold medal in the Olympics for almost 100 years. The last time they won a gold medal was 1908. They had never, ever won a Tour de France ever. They basically were a crummy team. I mean, they were awful. They bring this guy in to make some changes. So let me ask you something. Do you think that big changes were required? Isn't it obvious that some very significant changes were going to be required to turn this team around? Yes, but that's not what he did at all. In fact, his philosophy was exactly the opposite. That instead of making big changes to what was going on, he wanted to figure out how many small changes could be made, small improvements, incremental improvements, even to the tune of just changing 1% or 1 degree. And in fact, I want you to hear from his own mouth, from his lips, exactly how he created this change, this philosophy of change. And he's British, so you got to listen a little bit to catch every word. His accent's a little challenging, but I want you to hear from his own mouth. His name is Dave Brailsford. Dave Brailsford.
A lot of people say, right, we want to be perfect, let's go for perfection. That means nothing can go wrong. It has to be absolutely perfect. If it's going to be perfect, the chance of something going wrong is quite high, so the chance of failure is great. If you ask somebody, can you progress from where we are now? Could you be better in next week, the week after, in what you're doing now? Most people are going to say yes. Yeah, I could do that. Yeah, we can get better. And let's aim for perfection over there in the distance. But for now, let's just get better. Let's focus on getting better. And all of a sudden, it unlocks people. I think, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. And that's when I started to think about this idea of let's make progress by small steps rather than try and take these big, look for big step changes. So we started out, we broke everything that we could think of relating to a cycling performance down into all its little component parts, and we thought, can we improve them? Even if it's just a little bit, could we improve them? We went, yeah, we could actually.
So it's the bike, it's the cyclist.
It's the cyclist, it's aerodynamics, it's the helmet, it's the glasses, it's the washing of hands so you don't get ill. We brought a surgeon in to teach our riders how to wash their hands properly, because we know that if they shake hands, they've got bacteria in their hands. Or they come into an environment where a lot of people aren't. Like today, we've got quite a lot of people shaking a lot of hands, opening a lot of doors. The chances are then I'll touch my mouth, and if anybody's sick in here, I'm going to get that. So we make sure that there's constantly hygiene at the front of mind for everybody. We sleep in 21 different hotels through the Tour de France, which the organisation sorts out for us. We can't choose our hotels. We go in there, we don't know what beds we're going to get, we don't know what pillows we're going to get. So we have a little forward team, which is crazy when you think about the highly tuned athletes. Right. So we have a little forward team. They go into the hotels, they take the beds out, they hoover underneath, and they strip it all out. They clean all the rooms out, and then they put our own mattresses and beds in, which has been specifically made for each rider, and their own pillow, anti-allergenic pillow cover and sheets, air humidifiers, etc., etc. And is that going to win you the Tour de France? No. But if you clump it all together and you have that sort of mentality where everybody's looking for these little improvements all the time, it becomes contagious.
Beautiful. Dave Brailsford, you think about this. He was talking 20 years ago about washing our hands. Can you imagine? That one small thing that could be done differently, this 1% improvement might lead to his riders being healthier, getting sick less often. They changed the pillows in the hotels. They vacuumed. They painted the inside of the box trucks that carried the cycles to the races the color white. I want to ask you, why would they paint the inside of the trucks that carried the cycles to the races white? Go ahead, put in the chat what your answer is to that question. Why would they paint the inside of the trucks white? What do you think? Why do that? Think about it. Why paint the trucks white on the inside? What's the reason? It seems like here's a team that hasn't won a gold medal in 100 years. They want to paint the trucks on the inside white. Nobody even sees from the public sees the outside of the truck. I love it. To stay awake, Elena. But why? Why else? What do you think? Is that a waste of time? They painted the inside of the truck white because, of course, dust and dirt gather on the inside of those trucks. And those cycles have to perform at their best. And any bit of dirt, grime, dust that gets into the gears will affect the performance even this much, the tiniest amount. So painting the inside of the trucks white enabled them to see with the naked eye whether that dirt was there, and then they could clean it. This is the law of marginal improvements. Dave Brailsford really introduced this to performance cycling. And by 2004, they had won 2 gold medals at the Olympics. By 2008, this was the most medaled team in cycling in history. And to this point, I think they've won 5 or 6 or 7 Tour de France victories as well, all by committing to small change. Because even the smallest change in the status quo is transformational. I want you to hear that again. That small change in the status quo is transformational. This is science. This is not, some woo-woo stuff. This is not about thinking it so. It's the math of it. It's the physics of it. You cannot change the status quo by 1% or 1 degree and not see a change over the course of time that is transformational. You cannot change an input in any system and not see a change in the output. Sometimes this has been referred to as the butterfly effect or the law of small differences. But it's the status quo that leads to mediocrity. It's the status quo that leads to stagnation. And ultimately, when things stagnate, don't move, they die. So change is what's required, but it's not massive change that we have to make. To be more resilient in our lives, in our personal and in our professional endeavors, we just need to commit to making small change happen. In Japanese, it's called kaizen. Marginal gains are referred to as kaizen, meaning change good. Constant and never-ending improvement, even small incremental improvement is what's necessary. The goal that Dave Brailsford is speaking about is to aggregate that improvement, to, as he said, clump them together, because no one of those things, painting the inside of the box trucks wasn't going to win a gold medal at the Olympics. But when you clump together the 50, 60, 80 different improvements that he was able to make and to get everybody committed to making, that's what created the transformation. The thing about incremental improvement, a commitment to constant and never-ending improvement, is that it is everybody's business. And when it's everybody's business, it becomes cultural. So whether you are an entrepreneur, you're a solopreneur, you have a small organization, or you're operating within a larger structure, the culture of that company, the culture of the work that you do in the world, again, is so vital. And if resilience is a collection of small improvements, and you're the one that makes it everybody's business, or you make it your business to model it for others, eventually it becomes cultural. Eventually, the British cycling team, making these myriad improvements over time, were able to win. We're able to change their mindset. We're able to become winners, become more confident in their skills. Small change. Harvard Business Review studied high performance athletes, Olympians, professional athletes, and high performance executives, so to speak. What they found was that the one thing that those high performing athletes, like those British cyclists and executives, people that were leaders in organizations, managers, senior leaders, CEOs, successful entrepreneurs, they had one thing in common with those athletes. Kind of hard to imagine what it is. What do you think they had in common? Just go ahead. If you have an idea about that, go ahead and put that in the chat as well. What one thing do you think successful business leaders have in common with successful performance athletes? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this forward so you can see it. I'm going to step out of the way. You think about it, again, we said that resilience is holistic. It's mental, it's emotional, it's physical, it's spiritual. What's the one thing I see? Mariana wrote focus. Yes, focus. Where are they focusing their energy? This is kind of counterintuitive, but we've been speaking about it already today. Where is it? Where's the overlap and the commonality between the success of performance athletes, the best in the world, and people who are great at their job, great in their business, great at running businesses? Possibilities, Valerie, yes. Continuous improvement, Mary, great, beautiful. Love that, guys. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a word called rituals. Rituals. They're ritually committed to one thing together. I love it. Continuous improvement, emotional strength. Yes, it was their rituals for recovery. Remember, we talked about Rocky and how Rocky gets hit, gets back up, gets hit, gets back up. And that's what we think resilience is, but it's not. Yes, being able to get back up is a component, but it's not about bouncing back. Resilience isn't how we bounce back. Resilience is how we bounce forward. That's what we have to understand. And to bounce forward, we must recover. There must be a point of recovery. So when you think about recovery, it's not just one thing. It's how do we recover in the mental realm? How do we recover emotionally from the kinds of things that challenge us in that area? The feelings that we have, the fears, the doubts, the worries, the anxieties, the angers, the frustrations. How do we recover from feeling that way, or from the effect of those emotions on our bodies? What are we doing to restore ourselves and to reset ourselves physically and spiritually? There's so many things that each of you can do every day, but what that Harvard Business Review article talked about was the fact that whatever those things are that you commit to, they must become ritualized. Ritualized. Look, there's so many places that we can improve just a little bit, just like Dave Brailsford said. For me, some years ago, I started to recognize myself as getting agitated in the afternoon. I was agitated 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I would go grab a cup of coffee. I'd go get some sugar, get some chocolate or something. And I think a lot of us don't know what to do with that feeling. I was a lawyer back then. I spent 18 years. I'm still an attorney, but I practiced actively for about 18 years. And so, being a litigation attorney, I was kind of a professional warrior, a little bit like, getting in the ring like Rocky. So I had a good outlet for my anger, for my frustration, for my angst, but it was making me miserable on the inside. I started to do something a little different. Instead of reaching for that cup of coffee or going and getting a sweet, I started to take a 20-minute nap. I know it's going to sound funny, but the nap looked very similar to what you see in this picture right here. There's a woman in this physical quadrant, and you see her with her legs up the wall. She's sitting right up against the wall with her legs straight up. I was doing the same thing for 20 minutes. I read somewhere that taking 20 minutes with my eyes closed and my feet up the wall could feel like a 2 or 3 hour nap. And sure enough, in the afternoon, instead of going and getting that coffee, which would usually make me feel good for a few minutes, and then I would crash after that. I would find myself back to being angry and agitated. But when I took that 20 minutes of nap time for myself, just to close my eyes and put my feet up the wall, I came back to a peaceful place. I had more patience. I could see that my level of thinking, even for problem solving, was better at 3 o'clock in the afternoon than it was even at 11 a.m. because I had given myself that small bit of reset time. In fact, I gave a TED Talk some years ago about resets, because I used to start my day, and I don't know if any of you could relate to this over the last 12 months or so, putting my feet on the floor, and at the beginning of the day, putting my feet on the floor, feeling anxiety. If you know what I'm talking about, please go ahead in the chat, and just so we all understand that we're in this together. Starting the day feeling like you'd rather just crawl back in bed, basically. And I would wake up in the morning and I'd put my feet on the floor and I would already be feeling this sort of anxiousness and even dread, if I'm being perfectly honest about it. And I felt that way. And it was difficult to feel that way. But I decided, well, I didn't decide right away. I'll say that I was given a moment to choose something different. I found myself in the hospital on a Saturday morning when I should have been at my son's baseball game. I was lying on a gurney in the emergency room, waiting to see a doctor because my heart was pounding so hard that it felt like it was on the opposite side of my chest. And I was sweating profusely and my fingers were numb and tingling. And I thought I would never see my kids again. I was angry with myself in that moment. I was happily married to my college sweetheart. In fact, we'll be married this summer, 32 years. I had four healthy children. So much to be grateful for. And yet there I was lying on that gurney, not even understanding how I got there. And when the doctor came in, he told me that my heart was fine. And I'll never forget those words when he gave me that news, and I started to cry because I was so relieved that my heart was okay, but I wasn't okay. And I left that hospital. I walked out of that hospital that day, knowing that there were other people that went into that hospital that didn't walk out. I knew I'd been given a reprieve, a second chance of sorts. I'd had an anxiety attack, not a heart attack. I had a panic attack, not a heart attack. It was difficult, but I had to make some changes. I had to look at some things differently. And one night when I was having trouble falling asleep, trying to figure all this stuff out, which is not easy to figure out. Like I know many of you this year have been caught in the riptides of that fear, that doubt, that worry, and you've been trying to figure it out. I was trying to figure it out. And I was watching a movie, an old movie called Jerry Maguire. Maybe you remember that one. And Jerry Maguire has this character in the movie, his mentor, is a guy by the name of Dickie Fox. And Dickie Fox says to Jerry something like, in all honesty, I failed as much as I've succeeded, but I love my life and I love my wife. And I wish you my kind of success. That's what he told Jerry. And I went to sleep that night. And it was a small thing, but I woke up in the morning and I felt different. I felt differently. I put my feet on the floor again, same thing that I've been used to doing, only this time, instead of that rush, the anxiety and feeling like I just want to get back in bed, instead, when my feet hit the floor, I said something out loud. Words came out of my mouth that I didn't even know where they came from, but they came from Dickie Fox's mouth. And then they came out of my mouth. I said, I love my life out loud. Even in the midst of all of that confusion and just total uncertainty in my life, I said those words, those four simple words, I love my life, no matter what. I started that reset ritual when I wake up 12 years ago. And I've said it every day since, that simple ritual. I told that story when I was giving a keynote for a hospital on the in North Carolina. And when I was done, I got a message from the CEO of that hospital who said that she heard my story. She took my words to heart, and she had to say that only 2 weeks earlier, she found herself in the hospital thinking she was having a heart attack that turned out to be an anxiety attack. And she was embarrassed. She felt vulnerable. She didn't know whether she should share that with her team, with the people in her organization that cared about her and that that she didn't know whether that was a good idea or not. And she wanted to get my thoughts on it. Of course, I told her that I thought it was the best thing she could do, to be that transparent and honest with her team, because of course they wanted to support her. They wanted her to succeed just as much as she wants them to succeed. So ultimately, she did share her experience with her team. But we started to talk further about what she could do, the way I made some changes in my life, small changes. We talked about what she could do differently. And we came up with her recovery plan. I wanted to just quickly share with you the small changes that she committed to, so you can see that it is truly just like Dave Brailsford said, not big change, but small, micro change, micro pivots, if you will, that can be a game changer, can be transformational, especially when it comes to the status quo. So she committed to taking 10 minutes in the morning to be still, to be quiet, to meditate. I'm not a great meditator. It's one of those things that I sort of admitted when I was giving that TED talk, that I'm a crummy meditator, but I love to pray and I love to sit in stillness. And 10 minutes in the morning is the most important time of the day. Your first 10 minutes of the day says everything about how that day is going to go. It's the time for you to plant the seeds that you truly want to see grow. She started to do that. Small change. She also started to read before bed instead of watching the news before bed. 30 minutes of reading instead of 30 minutes of news before bed. Small change that she committed to do. Physically, she began to walk a little bit during the day. Just 20 minutes of walking, 20 to 30 minutes of walking is one of the best things that we can do for ourselves physically, as well as mentally, as well as emotionally and spiritually. Walking returns us to a place of equilibrium, of homeostasis. It calms us down. It calms our nervous system. It helps us to think more clearly. It has multiple benefits. Just 20 minutes of walking during the day. And lastly, she also decided that she wanted to get back to something that she had given up years ago when she got so busy with her work and her career. She wanted to start knitting again. She loved it. It made her feel good. It reminded her of her grandmother growing up. It was something she had lost and left behind. She started to knit again. These are small micro changes in the way that she approached life. But of course, we know that life has a way of kind of kicking us in the gut at times. You know, I shared that story just a moment ago about my time in the hospital. I was vulnerable. I was embarrassed. I didn't tell anybody. I was a lawyer. I didn't tell my colleagues. I didn't tell my adversaries. Certainly didn't tell the judge. You know, I kept it all to myself. But what I realized about that moment of lying on that gurney, waiting to hear whether or not I was going to live or die, frankly, it was a moment of pause for me. And I want to share with you right now a process, a way to deal with those moments where you get kicked in the teeth or kicked in the gut by life, by all kinds of things. It could be that a client has told you that they no longer want to work with you. It could be that you get a notice or an email with bad news. It could be that someone that you love is sick or has lost their life. It could be so many different things, and we never know what it's going to be and when it's going to be. That's part of the great mystery. But things are going to happen. And what I know from that experience when I was lying on that gurney is that we have to pause. There's an opportunity in pausing, to pause, to observe. We cannot observe accurately, clearly, when we are clouded by emotion, when we look at the situations that we're in and we are feeling that they are wrong or unfair. I was lying on that gurney and I was beating myself up that day. It was ironic. My heart was pounding and I was sweating and I was scared, and I was angry at myself for being there, for allowing myself to be so vulnerable when I'm supposed to be the strong one, right? I'm supposed to be the one that protects and provides and does all those things. But I needed to pause. And eventually I did. I took a few, more than a few deep breaths in that moment. And I let go. I let go of my judgment of myself. I was just there, just present with what was happening for a short period. And then, of course, the doctor came in. So the pause was really vital for me then. And it is so vital in every situation now in my life where something goes sideways or something hits me that's unexpected. I pause. I pause so that I can ask the questions, ask, what should I be noticing here? What don't I see here? What can I learn here and now? What opportunity is there in this moment? My wife, Randy, always asks me that. What is the creative opportunity presented in this moment by what it is that we're dealing with? We have things all the time. I'm sure you do as well. How often is it that we pause before we react? That we pause to get to neutral so that we're not judging things as good or bad, but simply being present with them so we can ask intelligent questions. When we ask a question, my theory is we always get an answer. Questions and answers are like cause and effect. You can't have one without the other. I don't know when we get the answer. That's the part that's a bit of a mystery. But when we ask questions, we get answers. We ask better questions when we're in a place where we're neutral. And then ultimately, it allows us to decide. It allows us to choose. The quality of our lives is very much equal to the quality of the decisions that we have made to this point in our lives. So choosing is vital. What are you choosing? Which way next? Am I choosing to see the lesson in this situation? Am I choosing to receive the gift of the learning, the gift of the feedback that I'm getting right now? All of that is vital to our success and to our growth. So you pause, you ask, and you choose at any moment when you find something's happening that's beyond your control. This is how you take control of that which is out of your control, how you create certainty out of that which is uncertain. So what I want you to do right now is just take a moment to reflect on one challenge that you've had recently, or maybe it's a challenge that happened a while ago, but you're still dealing with it. And I want you to think about these 3 steps: pause, ask, and choose. And I want you to write down your own observations now of yourself. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do this very quickly, because I truly believe that the faster we just sort of dive into something, especially something like this, the better it is for us. So don't think too much. Just pick one thing, a moment that you've been kicked in the gut recently, or you felt disappointed, or an issue that you're still grappling with and what to do about it. Reflect on it. Pause for a moment. And then write down what comes up for you. Pause, ask, choose. Go ahead and take 2 minutes to do that on your own right now. Take about one more minute right here. Beautiful. Okay. So here's what I would love to do. I want to get some sense of how you are interacting with this process right now, and would love it if you want to share. We can unmute you. You can, of course, put any comments in the chat. We can read those, but if you'd also be willing, we'd love to hear from you personally. So, you can raise your hand. There's a raise hand button, of course. We can unmute you, and you can let us know how this process went for you. You can also go ahead, as I said, put your answers in the chat. What was this like for you? And by the way, just as an aside, while you were writing, we were noticing that even in our slide right here, pause, ask, it says chose, not choose, which is a mistake, right? So, if you noticed it, great. If you didn't notice it, we're pointing it out in this moment. But this is a very small thing. It's a tiny little thing, and yet, you know what? There was a time in my life, years and years ago, I suppose, where this would have really angered me, because you want to be impeccable, you want to do things right, you want to make sure you cross all your I's and dot your I's and cross your T's. This is how little I care about that now, except that mistakes are going to happen, and it's fine to want to be impeccable, and a lot of the other things that we convince ourselves we have to do, we should do, we must do in order to be successful or live how we want to live. And yet there's always going to be these wonderful imperfections. I don't know how else to call it. It's a wonderful imperfection and a moment to practice, right? Tiny little thing. You pause, go, I see that. Great. Notice, observe what's happening. Like, did I all of a sudden, see that, find myself getting agitated or anxious? Ask myself, what's the best way to respond to that? What's the creative opportunity? And what's interesting is the creative opportunity was to use this as an example, a real life example, and point it out to you guys. So thanks for for that, of course. And I'd love to just get a sense of where you guys are at. Yeah.
We have a Mariana who indicated that she couldn't concentrate, and she wanted to know if that was indicative that she was not ready for a change. So I've unmuted her if you want to debrief.
Beautiful. Hello, Mariana.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes.
Oh, cool. Cool. How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you today?
I'm okay. Thank you.
What part of the world are you in?
I'm in France, in Paris.
Beautiful. I love that city. Wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful people, wonderful energy. Yeah. Wonderful food, drink, everything.
Yes. Food and drink especially.
That's for sure. So tell me, how was this process for you? What did you observe while you did this?
I had a blockage kind of. I couldn't even force myself of going into the process. That's why I wrote, actually. It's like I couldn't make myself thinking. I was maybe too afraid of
what if you were guessing about what you were afraid of, what would you say? What do you think that was?
Of a change, probably,
Yeah.
because I'm getting used to this. I know how to work this way I'm
Yeah.
doing until now, and I kind of I want to change, but I'm not sure I'm ready. That's the point. I don't know how to, because I'm like getting close to 50, and
Mhm.
I feel like I want it to be the part of the life when I'm gonna live a little bit differently, more for
Yes.
myself, more for pleasure, more maybe for sharing something with others and building something. I wish that this part of my life would have more sense, but it's like it's like heavy for me to
Mm,
pick this up, because I've been like hiding basically
yeah.
from myself from the world. I could say this.
So one of the questions, it's so interesting that you said that, because I think in many ways, anger for me, being angry was a great way to hide. If I'm angry about something, or I'm
I'm angry
upset
all the
about
time.
something.
Sorry.
Yeah. You know what I'm talking about,
Sorry.
right?
Yeah, I know perfectly.
Yeah. It's a great way to hide. It's really a great tool to hide behind our indignation or, our upsets.
Hmm.
So I think what's really wonderful is the fact that not only that we're having this conversation, but that you will have a moment. You don't have to do this now. You can, but it's not required. What I think will happen is that in a quieter moment, you'll get to ask yourself some new questions. And I would suggest that you just go through the process very simply to look at something that has bothered you or is bothering you, and pause to observe, maybe even sense where it is you feel that in your body, where it is that
Okay.
you feel those
I
things.
think what's bothering me, it's most of all, it's my fear of success,
Yeah.
which means fear of being me
Mm.
somehow, fear of allowing myself really being me, and like accepting myself too.
Yes. So you can ask
And
yourself, when you know that, when that's an observation that you've been able to
sorry
make
for
because you're being honest with yourself, self-aware, then you get to ask some questions, new questions. And one of the questions you ask is so powerful is, what do I get out of hiding? What is my payoff for hiding?
well, I get a lot. I get a
Mm,
kind of comfortable life, I don't have to take a
mm,
risk. I can complain.
mhm.
I've been thinking about this, like I had the time.
So
And
what do you miss out? Let's take the opposite part of it, because you've answered that question.
uh
What do you miss out
épanouissement.
on? Mhm. By
I'm trying
hiding.
to do you know this word? I don't know.
What's the
Uh
word?
épanouissement in French. Maybe
Small?
it's like growth. It's like really being happy. I think a happiness, basically.
Yes.
Real, like, to do something, to allow yourself to do something, to do something which you think you're meant to do, probably,
Indeed.
which will make you actually happy no matter the circumstances are. I don't know how much is it possible, but I have this like dream, and I have this idea that it's possible.
Right.
I don't know if I
But
explain myself
but playing but
well.
but playing safe or
Mhm.
or hiding, as you said, will not allow that dream to come to life.
Absolutely, will always keep me like half miserable. I figure it out. I even in my misery, I find a little of comfort, and joy. I'm pretty smart. I
Yes.
think so. I don't, but I
No,
can
I
fool myself. You
I
know.
think you're very, very self-aware. And so I think
Yeah,
you're so good at it that you're like confuse yourself.
absolutely. That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
Yeah, right. A little
I
too
can convince
clever, right?
myself even now everything is okay. Even though I know it's not. It's not like it's not
Yeah.
like it's supposed to be. I have this like feeling of calling, which I always had. and which is getting more urgent with time.
I know the feeling entirely. So I wrote a book
Really?
called, I wrote a book called Pivot, which was all about that feeling and ultimately how I pivoted, and not just me, but a lot of other people that we interviewed for this book to talk about how they made pivots in their lives because they followed was a lot of feelings, not just one. Yeah, but at some point, you just can't ignore it anymore. You can't hide,
Yeah,
as you
yeah,
said,
that's
hide
the
from it.
feeling.
Yeah.
I can't
So
hide, not for long anymore. I just can't live like I was living before. It's like I've seen everything. I tried everything in this life, in this version of life,
well,
It's
maybe
it's
not everything, but a
well,
lot of
I mean,
things.
in
Yeah.
this life I constructed in this like safe life, for me.
Yes.
But it's getting boring, and I have no air. I need to go out. It's
So
like
here's my
the
advice to you, but to
right.
everybody as well, which is that you think about how you create a transformation. And again, it's not by doing anything drastic. You don't have to do something that is, big. It's not about the bigness or the smallness of the thing. It's about the consistency. And over time, like dominoes, the way dominoes tip, one domino
Mhm.
touches the other and the other and the other. And, before you know it, you've got a million dominoes that get tipped over because you started with one tiny one. So I want to
Right.
think for all of us now, my request is that you all think about what we addressed today and how our conversation went today, and where it is that you can commit to making a small change, a tiny change, a 1% change in the way that you recover from the stress that you feel at times. We're all under great stress. People have learned to live with that stress. And I will tell you that stress does not kill us. There's I'll put this up here. The real enemy for us of achieving whatever it is that is our calling and our mission in life to accomplish, the thing that gets in the way of that is not stress. Stress we need for growth. It's a lack of recovery from the stress that exhausts us. And when we are exhausted, that's the true issue. That's the problem that we have when we're exhausted, Mariana. That's when we don't have the patience for the solutions, when we don't have the
Yeah,
presence to recognize
it's
and to,
amazing. Sorry, I'm sorry. It's just you're saying exactly like what I'm feeling and what I'm doing. Like I'm feeling like I need like maybe half a year for recovering. I lost some weight. I'm starting to actually I'm doing 20 minutes walk every day now,
yes.
and I'm getting healthy. I start to take care of my health, but I feel like I need more time. I cannot just jump like this. I need like maybe half a year.
So
I'm told.
here's my request of you and everybody that's on here, that you not only create your own recovery map, just like I did with that CEO from the health company, from the hospital that I work with, that you just create your own map, recovery map. One tiny little thing that you can change to create a recovery zone for yourself mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and that you commit to it, and that you even perhaps ask somebody to be your accountability partner, to hold you accountable and check in with you. Now, if you've taken the resilience assessment already, fantastic. If you didn't go ahead and do that already, then what we want you to do is just to start with your own personal score. So if you've not done that yet, you can go to asw.resiliencerank.com to get your score. And then what you're going to receive from us will be emails with resources. There's nothing to sell. There's no pitch. It's simply, we're going to serve you by giving you the benefit of the data and the research that we've been studying, the research we've collected for many years at this point, so that you can start on that road to make those small changes a reality for you. In addition to that, we're happy to meet with you. So anybody that's taken the assessment, gotten a score, and would like to actually have a consultation with us, it's very simple. All you have to do is email us at team@adammarkel.com, team@adammarkel.com, and either myself or one of our team members will meet with you to talk about, to discuss the score, as well as the kinds of things that you can do differently. Remember, there's so many little changes that you can make. It's just a question of choosing a few that are going to make the most sense for you, and then making them ritual. As we said, the ritual is the key. To ritualize those small changes will be an absolute transformation for you over time. Of course, I'd love to connect with you. We have a wonderful podcast. We're constantly having these discussions with other people who are pivoting in their businesses and their lives. And we're talking about resilience regularly on the Conscious Pivot podcast. And of course, if you didn't get a chance to have your question answered today by me personally, I'm also happy to connect with you on LinkedIn and answer those questions there as well. And again, if you'd like to have maybe more personal time, anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes with me personally or a member of our team, all you have to do to access us in that way is to email team@adammarkel.com, indicate that you'd like to have a resilience consultation, 20 to 30 minutes with a team member to go over what your recovery plan will be. That's this plan right here, those small changes, as well as how to not only implement them, get started, but how to hold yourself to them, because often we know that's the biggest issue is we start things, but then we don't complete them. So it's been an absolute blessing to be here with all of you today. I've really enjoyed it. I would love to just end in one specific way. We love to just find out, what are your big takeaways? What's one thing right now that you want to remember from the session, from the time that we had here together? All we want you to do is just go ahead and type that into the chat, but don't hit enter yet. In a moment, I'm going to count down from 10, and we're all going to hit enter at the same time. We call this a takeaway waterfall. So what's the one thing that you want to remember about our discussion today, about resilience, about creating those rituals for recovery, anything at all, the 1% changes? Go ahead and type that in the chat. See what you come up with. In just a couple of seconds here, I'm going to count down from 10. We'll hit enter, and then we'll get to read all of the amazing insights that you guys have from our time together today. Okay, here we go. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hit enter. Go ahead, hit enter. Fantastic. Love it. Fantastic. Let's make sure we take some baby steps. Know that you don't have to do it alone. We're all in this together. I wish you all a beautiful rest of your day or your evening, wherever you are. And as it says on my shirt, I am resilient. I know you are as well. Mwah. ASW, I love you. I love this community. Thank you so much for having me. Ellen, thank you again. Great to be here.